What's going on, guys? Hold on a second. Lift my seat up. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Simon Says. Don't worry about the TV behind you. I was watching a show. Today, I want to address the men. All right. The reason why I want to address the men is because I think in our day and age today, there's so many influences and advice from certain kind of guys that I think, while they are based in facts, I don't think necessarily paint the best outcome for men, right? So I want to kind of address the men that are, either in my situation, if you're single looking for a relationship, or if you're in a relationship and you're dealing with a woman that maybe you're thinking about marrying, something like that. I want to talk to you, men, about something that I feel we need to we need to have a discussion about, right? So, with all this rise of it's called like the manosphere or whatever, but it's essentially a lot of guys who are either really, really successful, extremely like fit, or they just have a lot of success when it comes to getting a woman's attention. They'll give you pieces of advice that are more so self-gratifying than it is for the success of a relationship with someone, right? So a lot of the like hustler guys will tell you, just go out there, work hard, make your money, and don't really focus on anything else. And then when you're in your 40s, you can go out and just pay play or whatever, have your fun. You'll have the guys who are just like the ultra gym bros who are like, you go out, you work out, you just get yourself as big as you can, as muscular as you can. You don't focus on anything. Just dedicate yourself to this. And then you'll have the guys who are just really, really good with ladies, who will tell you, what to say, what time to say it, how to dress, all this other stuff. While these things separately in small doses can work, I think when you take it to the extreme, like a lot of these gentlemen who are giving you this kind of advice, it oftentimes causes you to be in that relationship where you're more so trying to appeal to yourself than maintain a successful relationship. And I see this a lot because this is something that I went through when I kind of discovered this little manosphere issue. I started paying attention to what a lot of these guys say, and I'm looking at their track records or the receipts that they're showing, and I'm like, okay, well, you talked to this girl, you talked to this girl, you talked to this girl, but was it close? Were you closer to the marriage than you were beforehand? No. Okay, then you talk to this other girl. Were you close to getting married to her? No. Then you talk to this girl. Were you? It's a pattern of, and I hate to say it this way, it's a pattern of failures, and those failures are predicated on the fact that those men don't necessarily want to be in a healthy relationship. And being in a healthy relationship requires sacrifice. I often like to say that the manosphere movement, or at least the extreme manosphere movement, is kind of like the opposite side of the same coin that the extreme feminist movement is on, right? It's two different faces of the same type of coin. And at the center of both of these narratives is the idea of self-gratification, right? Just doing things for yourself. How can you benefit? How can you get what you can get out of the other person without having to sacrifice anything? And I think this is a dangerous territory because, number one, we don't show the love of God, all right? And maybe that's not the intent, or maybe that's not even a thought in some of those guys' mind, but you cannot replicate the correct and honest love of God if all you're thinking about is trying to gratify yourself, please yourself by maybe taking advantage of somebody else. You can't accurately relay that love of God. And God has given us instructions on I wouldn't say instructions, but he's given us the right context of how to approach relationships, right? In Ephesians chapter 5, it talks about a man loving the church a man loving his wife as Christ loved the church, that his love for his wife is what makes her pure, holy, and sanctified, right? I'm paraphrasing that, but you can read that scripture yourself. I believe it's Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. You can go look it up yourself, right? But there is a requirement for the man before he gets into that relationship to be a good man, a godly man, to have certain morals, to have certain standards, for himself. And within that standard, he seeks out a wife who is not outside of that standard. The Bible talks about not being unequally yoked, right? To seek a wife that is within that standard and honors God in the same way that he does, right? So I want you, first of all, to understand that sacrifices are necessary in a successful relationship. Any good man, any man who's ever been in a long relationship, he's been married for a very long time, will tell you that part of the success was sacrificing, not just on his hand, but on her end as well too. But I'm addressing the men today. So ladies, I may make a video. I don't know, man. I'm a guy. So, but there is sacrifice that is required. What you have to be careful of, though, is when do you sacrifice, or when do you show that love and affection, and when do you have to stop? Because I think one of the things that we often get ourselves into trouble is we might meet somebody who is nice at first, who maybe she presents herself as a kind of woman that we want to be in a relationship with. And as we get to know her a little bit longer, we see some things start to pop up that we probably should address, but we don't address. And then we decide that we want to commit, even though we have these things that cause doubt as to whether she is a good fit for us. And then we'll be in that relationship or marriage for years and we'll be unhappy, right? And then there's a lot of dysfunction, because what really happened when those doubts creeped up is that some things were revealed to you, and those things might have been that she is not a good fit for you. And in your pursuit, maybe she was really, really beautiful. Maybe she cooked really, really well, or she was just a very, very outgoing person, or you just felt like there was an emotional tie to her. You weren't able to separate yourself from the fact that she is not a good fit for you, and you leaped into the relationship thinking that it could have worked. It's gonna work itself out. That maybe somewhere down the line you'll just find this random spark that'll work out, right? So guys, we have to be careful when we're entering into a relationship and really take heed to the doubts that we have. Now, there are certain doubts that you could probably overlook. One of those is, if let's say you're dealing with a really, really good woman, right? And she loves God, she's great cook, she's not perfect, but she's great. And then along comes this other woman who's maybe she's a little more beautiful, or she's a little bit, she's a notch above in one aspect, right? And in your mind, you're like, oh man, I have this one girl over here, she's really good, but then there's her, right? That could be a doubt that creeps up. At that point, hey man, overlook that, because maybe you're just focusing on one aspect of who she is. And I heard someone say this, right? Maybe what you're focusing on is the fact that you have a crush on someone else. And a crush is just a lack of information on someone, right? So if you know that you have a good person in your life and you have chemistry, you have trust that's built, there's a bond there, go ahead and commit. But if you're sitting there with legitimate doubts, say maybe you have a hard time getting along, maybe the chemistry is not really there, maybe she doesn't quite respect your standards or your boundaries the way you wish she would, right? That's probably something you need to address before you get into that relationship. And I say that because I think too many men are in the vein of, relationships don't work, marriages don't work, it's all somebody else's fault. What we need to understand is relationships are dependent on two people, you and the other person that you're in that relationship with. And if one half of that is letting things go by, or if both of those people are just letting things, go by, they're not addressing issues when they come up, they're not being honest, they're not setting clean and good boundaries, what tends to happen is the relationship fails. And when the relationship fails, both people are going to blame the other person. It's their fault that this didn't happen. It's their fault that this didn't happen. It's their fault that this didn't happen. I can't tell you how many stories I heard in those manosphere where you have guys who are like, I was married 3 times before, marriages don't work. And I'm like, bro, the timeline between you getting divorced from the first wife, meeting the other wife, getting married to her was all of 3 years. Like, how do you didn't spend enough time with that person to really actually see if she was the right fit, right? I think too many of us, we look at it from a viewpoint of, what does she do for me? And you can't have that kind of mindset, because here's the thing. Ultimately, someone can always learn how to cook. They can always learn how to clean, and they can get better at certain other things. But the one thing that's really, really, really hard to change is who somebody is. And it's really hard to change who you are when you're busy being active in a relationship. It's extremely hard. That's why you have to get to know the person first before you commit to them. You can't try to change them or ask them to be someone else after the relationship has already started. Because at that point, it's like, it's like trying to study for a test while taking a test. It's really impossible. Some things you'll get wrong, but some questions you'll get wrong, and some questions you'll definitely fail at. So I want to say the first thing as men that we should do when you're in that situation, when you're trying to, when you're either seeking to be in a relationship or you're with someone and you're seeking the marriage, ask yourself truly, is this person someone that I am willing to spend the rest of my life with? And don't base it off of just meaningless things. Again, I know that we have certain things that are men's responsibilities and certain things that are women's responsibilities. But don't base the whole success of your relationship as to whether or not she can cook or clean very well, okay? Because those are things that someone can get better at over time, all right? Base it on what is our bond like? Is it something that I can present before God and say, I'm proud of this relationship? Or is it something that I'm like, I really can't, I'm kind of ashamed of our dynamic. I'm ashamed of how we get along. I'm ashamed of the fact that maybe we're not who we're supposed to be. Because if it's the former and not the latter, you're good to go. Commit to that person. Because if you can present that relationship before God and say, God, we're truly honoring the context that you've given us, you're good to go. If it's the second half, you got some things you got to work on. And sometimes the very thing that you might have to work on is you got to be willing to walk away from that person. And I think that's something some guys struggle with too, is having the discipline to walk away. I can't tell you how many times I've seen some guys get into relationships with the wrong woman, where you can clearly tell she was the wrong woman. Not that she was evil or anything like that, but they just were not a good fit. They were on two different planes. He was here and she was here. They were on two different planes, and yet they tried to force it together. And then now you have a mess that they're it's like trying to put Band-Aids on a broken glass, Regardless of how many Band-Aids you put, there's still cracks and it's still broken. So we have to have that discipline of being able to walk away once we know that this person is not it. This individual is not who I'm supposed to be with. Maybe they're a great person. Maybe they have everything going on. But as far as the relationship between her and I, it's not working. I can be able to walk away. And I think if we look at it that way, we can avoid having to live and be in relationships that are self-gratifying. Because I think overall, a lot of the manosphere, the men who are giving these advice, are not men who I would say started out hating marriage and relationships. I think these are men who went about it the wrong way and were hurt as a result of it. And I want to give you guys the best possible ways to go about it. I see a lot of young people getting married nowadays, and I'm so happy for them. And I pray that a lot of them have found the right person, the person who respects their boundaries and they have a great relationship with. I pray that everyone who finds that kind of love, is blessed under God. I think that's the most beautiful thing you can ever do in your life, is to find the right person to walk with the rest of your life, right? But you can't settle for just about anyone. You can't settle for just any woman just because she is beautiful. You have to have that discipline within yourself to analyze and make sure that who she is respects you, respects your walk with God, respects who you are, and is willing to help you as you're willing to help her. And you can't be afraid to sacrifice, fellas, because it's not about you just bringing yourself up and trying to be this guy who can say, look at what I've had. Look at what I've got, right? You have to be willing to say, hey, if it comes down to it, I'm willing to lay down my life for it, right? For her, for the family. The same way that Christ loved the church is the same way that we're expected to love our wives, fellas. And if we can do that, if we can get in that mindset, if we learn how to love correctly, but with the right discipline, I think we can avoid a lot of those turmoil? Is it turmoil? I think we can avoid a lot of those chaotic relationships. And if we can do that, I think we'll see a lot less of the guys who are extreme and giving all this self-gratification advice, and more people who are praising and giving advice that leads to relationships that we can truly present before God and be proud of. Anyway, guys, my word for the day, fellas. Like I said earlier, man, I think marriages is a beautiful thing. I think that's what God designed us to be. I think he gave us the emotions and the desires to want to connect with other people so that we can properly find, as fellas, we can find the right women to partner with and go about life. And guys, I pray that every one of you who's looking for a wife will find her. It might take it may take a while, but the best thing to do is be patient and use the word of God. Use the discernment, use the discipline that you've instilled to make sure that whoever she is the right person for you and honors God. Anyway, guys, that's my word for today. Hope you guys understood what it is I was trying to say. I hope it made sense. If you guys have any questions, type it down below in the comments. I'll see you on another video. Deuces.